So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our taste of the day of intelligent automation, and that's our friends from Silicon Valley in the West Coast, AppOrchid, and their tool Contract AI. So Mel, I think we're going to turn over to you now.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And let me just make sure everybody can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it. Thanks, Mel.
Yeah. So I think everybody here on the phone knows the complexity of the enterprise, right? Whether it's public sector, private sector, small company, big, medium. If you just look at like the number of SaaS companies being born every day, and then multiply that by the number of applications they're building, and then think about how some of these companies are bringing in these new SaaS providers into their environments, it's incredibly complex. I spent the last 5 years at Accenture, and the implementation, the integration, the level of resources needed is overwhelming. So how do companies keep it simple? How do you get that competitive advantage? How do you reduce time to market? Like those are kind of really big and strategic, but not easy to implement. So the idea here is, we started in 2014, really kind of before this hyper commercialization of AI took shape in the last few years. And the DNA was, and the vision of the company was to help companies build their own AI applications, or provide a platform to allow them to build their own applications. And again, as I said, just reducing the time to market and creating that competitive advantage for whatever industry or sector they're in, or new markets they're going after, was really the vision of AppOrchid. So we love the fact that everything we do is natively built on an AI platform, and not licensed by a third party. So there's a degree of ownership and control there that helps us scale. Just from a platform perspective, if you see these products, I won't get into products here, but the concept is providing a platform that allows you a pre-processing data layer, right? I think we're all familiar with data warehouses, but here, the platform is very simple to allow you to bring all of that unstructured and structured data, even a lot of that tribal knowledge together, apply the right level of AI model or machine learning model. And then I would say the secret sauce that really happens is being able to build models that have the right algorithms and the right testing to derive a much higher accuracy than what you see on open source AI models today. Anybody here could literally go to Azure or AWS and download their pre-built machine learning models. That's great, and it's actually a great kind of way to learn. But the real value is in these knowledge graphs that allow you to build relationships between data elements. And once you understand those data elements, what is the contextual meaning of those data elements, right? And then being able to provide a visualization of those data relationships is what really becomes, somebody's trying to enter, becomes really important. So again, this is the idea of AppOrchid. We have I think we have 25 applications today. Mike has a great story around BP. We've landed a lot more logos. He throws in probably the backyard of some of you. They're very interested in vendor negotiations for their car parks and baggage claims. Video surveillance with Dallas-Fort Worth Airport to reduce the number of refunds for a lot of the advanced parking reservations. They do over 1,000 advanced parking reservations a day at DFW. So we're experimenting with some new ideas with AI and video surveillance. HCL, contingent labor. Most of our applications today are centered around NLP and computer vision. And computer vision, by the way, has come a long way. We're even getting down into table extraction for an SOW, for example, to really help your teams understand contingent labor and different variances in pricing. So the use cases go on and on, but really the idea here is to have a flexible and configurable platform, right? Very little to no code. That's the idea. From there, I'd like to hand it over to Mike, because I referenced these knowledge graphs and the relationships of data elements. And he and the team have done some really neat work there. So Mike, maybe a good segue.
Yeah, like our knowledge graph, this is our patent pending approach, and just one of the ways that we use AI to inform. One of the key things that we're able to do is understand commercial and legal language, something you won't see out there in the market, because most NLP models are trained on written word or conversation. They don't understand things like intellectual property, indemnification. But through our use of knowledge graphs, actually, that's how we capture that, what we say with a tribal knowledge of just about anything. But we focus, for contract AI, we use this knowledge graph to actually focus on legal and commercial terminology. And so think of this as similar to Facebook or Google. They also use similar knowledge graph technology. And from this, we're able to understand, general things like liability as part of a contract, which has clauses, which has terms and conditions, which is also tied to a purchase order who has signature. It creates that relationship between all things. But also you'll see there will be specific things that would be specific for your company around branding and risk and things like that. And this is just a very short, like, pictorial representation of how it creates that relationship and that association of things. And this is how the machine becomes more, I would say, smarter. But one of the things I would say is that in all the products I looked out at, you have to be a bit cynical and test things, because I feel like most of the things that I've seen out there, AI stands for another individual actually doing the work. And I think what's really important here, and why I left BP to come work for AppOrchid, is this truly is artificial intelligence, and it works. I looked at a lot of snake oil in my career, and what's interesting here is the different levels of and approaches to AI that we use to inform. So we'll use multiple different models rather than just machine learning. We'll use linguistics and grammatical parsers, and we'll use other trained models. We'll use open source NLP, but we'll also apply different algorithms onto that as well. Mel had mentioned computer vision. We'll use computer vision to understand, and be able to extract what's in tables, whether they're symmetric or asymmetric tables. Your RACEs, will be able to understand that. We'll be able to understand what that cell means based on the row and column and those headings. And that's really where things start to be powerful. But what is interesting to me is that I've built this product on an AI platform. So I haven't just licensed some AI technology that's kind of stagnant. I'm able to actually pull in any type of artificial intelligence that's built into our platform and quickly incorporate that at any time into the product, which is kind of it's really empowering, right? I came from BP, where it would have taken us years to create this, and with what we can do in like 2 months of development and incorporation. And I think that's one of the things that really unlocks the power, especially for large enterprises, is to partner with smaller, more agile companies that have that agility, that access, and the ability to quickly innovate. Mel, I'll kind of turn it back over to you.
Right, Mike, before you do, you've got a couple of questions here. So I don't know if you can see the chat, or shall I read those to you?
Now let me pull up the chats here. All right, first one. So typically our product is stored in the cloud, and it's a cloud-based, but we can do it within a private on-site, if that's something that's required, where we are working with one client that is restricted from having anything on the cloud. So we can do both. We prefer to have it in the cloud. it's easier for us to maintain, and it's more standard across the rest of our clients. And then with the automatically generated knowledge IPR of your customer.
I can take that, Mike.
Okay, I didn't necessarily understand the question.
Oh, I think it has to do with, and whoever asked, please, it's a great question, because it seems like IPR is intellectual property rights. You know, it really depends, right? That's the answer, because some companies want to take their proprietary knowledge graphs that they've built with AppOrchid's help, right, with the AI partners' help, and want to take it to market and go sell it, right? So there is a rev share agreement, or there's various ways that we discuss the IP licensing model and rights and ownership. Any other questions? Happy to answer. It's a great one. Okay. I think from here, you know, we wanted to actually tell the story, right? And none better than Mike, who left BP. When I heard Mike was joining AppOrchid, I saw the contract AI demos, and I left Accenture. So Mike, this is back over to you. I think you're the best to talk about it.
Yeah, thanks, Mel. Yeah, when I was at BP, I was kind of frustrated with how long it was taking us to get to contract. It was taking us 3 to 6 months to get to contract. We were kind of getting a little bit of a tarnished name of being a barrier to innovation at BP. And you know, I came from the environment of doing those large, you know, multi-billion-dollar outsourcing deals and outsourcing advisory, and we could do one of those deals in 3 to 6 months. So why was it taking us so long to get a SaaS deal done? And so I started digging into some of, you know, what was the actual root cause and what was the problem statement of why some of these agreements were taking so long. And what I found was that 80% of our time was really spent negotiating terms and conditions, and only 20% of our time was spent negotiating what I would say the statements of work, the deliverables, the milestones, etc. But 100% of the disputes arose from the statements of work, deliverables, and milestones, and not where we were spending 80% of our time. So, you know, there was just a, you know, it was an unequal balance of where we were spending our time and actually where the actual risk actually existed for BP. So I had been playing around with understanding AI for a number of years with the former CEO of AppOrchid, who passed away last year. And we were always, you know, I just wanted to know what AI could possibly do. So we had done a number of use cases, but then we came up with one with, what if we allowed our suppliers to be able to negotiate with an AI tool? And could we be able to do that? And so we started out kind of exploring that, and we co-developed Contract AI together with AppOrchid. And what we quickly needed to understand was, what would we allow an AI tool to negotiate? What did good look like for BP? What was actually in our contracts? And from that perspective, I had no idea. I had no idea what hundreds of people were negotiating and what they ended up with. A lot of things came through past my desk for signature, but I couldn't actually read all of them thoroughly. So what we used AI is we built an analytics tool to first ingest and understand actually what actually was good for BP. So we were able to learn from our signed contracts what was actually acceptable, what was in our contracts, to be able to inform what we would allow an AI tool to be able to negotiate with our suppliers. What we did with that was then I would call it kind of curation of the clauses. But what we were able to do is dynamically create a clause library for BP based on what was signed. So we were able to, when we started, we had our templates, we had our fallback positions, but nobody really knew whether they were good, bad, or indifferent. And through the use of this tool, we were able to understand the performance of our templates, understand the performance of our clauses, and then shift to areas where we could eliminate negotiation and switch to areas where we had acceptable to BP clauses. And what we were able to do was then allow the suppliers to negotiate after we curated what was actually acceptable and what we would allow a tool to negotiate. And you know, if you sign up for our hour session, we can show you a demo of how that's done using scoring and weighting. But we were able to dramatically reduce BP's time to contract from 3 to 6 months to as little as 24 hours and as long as 8 days. So right now we're scaling up to over 200 users. BP called me, I think, in May, and they were pretty excited to tell me they were able to do 15 M&A contracts within a week, start to finish. And each one of those would have taken them, you know, 6 weeks on average to have completed. So we were able to eliminate 90 weeks of legal and procurement work just in 1 week. You know, this is a little bit old, but, you know, when the slide's a couple months old, but we had 140 suppliers through the tool. And what's interesting is that the suppliers like this tool as well. I've had a number of them kind of seek me out to let me know that they love the process of going through Contract AI, because while it reduced the time for BP from 3 to 6 months to a week, it also reduced that pursuit time for the suppliers as well. And what we've seen is actually by offering up win-win options to the suppliers, we've actually become much more compliant to actually our template and our go out positions than we've ever been. So we've actually reduced time. We've increased you know, the positive outcome from our stakeholders by reducing the friction between legal, procurement, the stakeholders, and the supplier. You know, we've actually freed up our procurement team's time to focus more on the area where disputes happen, which is become closer to the stakeholders to focus on deliverables, statements of work, acceptance criteria, et cetera.
Well, so Mike, thanks a lot for that, and welcome any other questions. We don't want to to go through all this for you. You guys can read on your own, but I think what's really interesting is that the market's changed so much. You know, coming from some of the bigger companies, they still spend so much money on BI and analytics. It's mind-boggling. Any enterprise you talk to, they've got Cognos and MicroStrategy and these big enterprise applications. So I think the future is really becoming a lot more nimble. And I think that's what this intelligent automation exchange is all about, is really looking at innovation in the marketplace. And we found that we're able to do what these big packaged software applications can do for a fraction of the cost. Implementers are going to still charge a tremendous amount of money. It's consulting and hours at the end of the day, but it's really those that have a very flexible, you know, zero code, if you can get there, because everybody says they're low code, but the devil's really in the details when you see how you can build these templates. So I think that the future is really those configurable, flexible platforms where the customer can build their own and really come up with their own applications, right? Because they know their business the best.